While they're loading that up, I'll just tell you real quick. These really ugly slides. Kathy said, those are the ugly slides. I didn't say that. It just looked different. And I just wanted to explain that the lawyers for the University of Alabama are actually technically employed by the system. This is the University of Alabama system logo. And basically the lawyers for UAB, UAH, UA System, UAB Health System, and UA here, we're all kind of one big law firm. But I sit in Rose Administration, and my primary job is to provide advice to legal administrators for the University of Alabama. But they have asked us to start using this template, so it doesn't have Big Al, but Roll Tide. I'm gonna kind of clean up. One thing I wanted to say is I really am thrilled with Kathy at ua.edu for putting Beth, Howard, and Vanessa on the schedule so that they could talk to you, kind of get a different face up here. But I wanted you to hear that first because those are the two areas that can get you in the most legal trouble, from monetary damages. This is important too. But I'll tell you, if somebody tried to sue because we violated FERPA, they don't have a private cause of action. But they do under the ADA, and they do under Title IX and Title VII. Lots of monetary damages, huge damage to your reputation. So I'm thrilled that we had that kind of change. You may be nervous now, which is appropriate, but I wanted to give you some good piece of advice, is that we are self-insured. UAB, UAH, and UA, and all put our money into one big pot, and we self-insure ourselves. We have some excess coverage. And what that means is if you're doing something within the scope of your employment with the university in your teaching GTA position, not in your student role, okay, in your employee role, if you do something negligently, then we're going to cover you. If they file suit, we are here to defend you, and we will start working with you. But not if you retaliate, because then you're going to lose your coverage. And not if you date your student, and then they come back and sue because they said they had authority and I needed a good grade or a good recommendation for grad school. If they come forward and file a complaint, you're on your own, and that has actually happened here. And they had to hire their own attorney, and they won. The university won in that lawsuit. It's probably been 15 years ago, but it cost probably $300,000 out of that individual's pocket to pay for their lawyer and the defense of the suit. So you're good, you're covered if you don't blatantly violate our policies. So hopefully, because you're not going to blatantly violate policy and you're going to act within the scope of employment, listen to what you heard today, and remember, even if you do it negligently, we're going to cover you. Okay, so I'm supposed to kind of, in a few minutes, teach you about something that's important to you as a student, because you have some rights under FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. I'm also going to try and touch on how we're going to help you to give religious accommodations to students in your classes. And again, you're in that dual role. I want you to know if you need a religious accommodation, how to achieve that. We probably won't have time to go into the ethics, but I did a detailed handout in your, the PowerPoint slides. There's a 4-page handout. And the bottom line of that, because I don't think I'll get to it, the bottom line of that is do not use your position as a GTA, your employment, for your personal benefit, okay? That means as student GTAs, your professors can't ask you to babysit their kids for no income, to go to the airport and pick them up, to do all kinds of personal errands. You are not their personal slaves. And hopefully nobody will do that. But most of my slides are based on things that have happened in the past, okay? So we want to make sure they never happen again. So the main thing with ethics is just don't do anything. Don't use our property to go have a side business, okay? That's using the university's property for your personal gain. Just don't do that, okay? And again, there's lots of details in the slides on that, in the handout. All right, so let's get started on FERPA. So that's really related to how to protect a student's records. We're going to talk about what is a record. I can't possibly train you in my time period on what FERPA really covers, so I gave you the website, and you can link to it if you have electronic copies of this to our actual privacy guidelines. They very much track federal regulations. Also, our registrar is kind of the adult in charge of maintaining compliance with this law, and he's built a wonderful a wonderful website that has lots more training for you. There's FAQs, there's PowerPoints, all kinds of things to help you get the gist of what needs to be protected under FERPA. One of the resources that he has is this fact sheet, and I just briefly am summarizing maybe what's on a 2-page document. Don't use campus-wide IDs and names to post grades. You should be able to use that through Blackboard, and you don't need to do what we used to do in the old days, but I'm amazed at how we sometimes find faculty members violating that. Don't leave graded tests for students to pick up. We actually had this happen last semester. I mean, the professor was busy and said, here's all your graded assignments, y'all go through it and find yours. Well, you've just breached the privacy of every student in there, in your class, because nobody else is entitled to know how you graded their assignment. So protect the confidentiality of the student information, and know as a student, that's what you're entitled to as well in your student role. Don't circulate your class list with names in CWID. The names is okay, it's the CWID, because there's a lot of stuff that you can get to with the CWID. You can order pizza through Domino's with an ACT card, and they can play, you just don't want to do that. We've actually had to throw out a student in the past for actually copying down CWIDs as the class lists run around, and ordered lots of Domino's pizza. So that person no longer has the privilege of being here. You don't want to provide lists of students enrolled in your class to a bunch of people. Why? Because it's actually protected under our policy. Who's in your class is protected. You want to not include confidential information about students in a recommendation letter unless you've gotten the student's consent. Now, if they come into you and say, would you write a letter of reference for me? And they hand you a resume, and you base everything in your letter of recommendation on your personal knowledge without you having to go to your record book and looking up grades and anything on that resume, well, then you haven't disclosed anything from a record at the university, so you're okay. If you're in doubt, just get them to write down a little consent. I consent for you to release information in a letter of recommendation to so-and-so. Have them date it and sign it. That's as simple as it gets. That's what the law says you have to do. It's not like in the HIPAA world with medical information where, there's regs that say there has to be 17 things on that release. That's not the case with FERPA. It can be very simple. You just want to make sure the student's giving you permission to release information from your record. So that's sort of, without going through all of it, that's a quick little helpful hint. So, real quick law lesson. FERPA gives you 3 rights, and your students 3 rights. They have the right to review their records, not necessarily get a copy of it, but look at them. Okay? So word to the wise, if you're creating a bunch of emails about students and sharing it with, your boss or whoever, you've created a record about a student, and they technically would have the right to go ask to inspect it. So if my word here, advice here is, if you don't need to retain an email, don't keep it. Think about, do I need that email? And sometimes you get sloppy in your emails, and you'll regret if it's on the front page of the CW. So be careful about what you write in your emails about your students, so that you're not embarrassed by that. So number 1, right to review their records. Second right is the chance to amend it. Now that is if somebody's made a typographical error and they made A and somehow it was reported it was a B. Kind of hard to do that now with the way that we handle records. But students do have a right to seek to amend. What I'm going to spend the rest of my time on here is they have the right to limit disclosure. How do we protect the privacy of that information? There's lots of legitimate disclosures that are in the regulations and in our policy, but we're going to focus on 5 exceptions that I think would be pertinent to you all. So before we do the 5 exceptions, I need you to understand what is protected. FERPA protects records. FERPA does not protect the conversations that you have with your students or that you observe in the classroom every single day. Wow. Okay. FERPA, so it's records, it's not the conversations. Things that you keep, your personal notes, that's an exception. So as long as nobody else needs to see it and you're keeping notes just for your own benefit, those are not FERPA, so no, they wouldn't get to inspect it. And then oral conversations or what you observe are not protected. So real quick, consent, I've kind of already covered that. Very simple to get consent. Directory information. Any of this information, this comes from our policy, is called directory information, and it really wouldn't hurt if somebody released that information. The only exception would be if a student has said, I don't even want directory information released, and they have a couple weeks after they get here in the fall every year to say, I don't want directory information released. That means we can't tell anyone you graduated, that you even were here. Very, 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 very few students use that, but we've got something in Banner that tells you whether or not that student has put a directory hold. That's what they call it, a directory hold. Otherwise, all of that information is fair game. We could give it to the media if we wanted to, okay? The third disclosure reason is school officials. This is so that we can share information among ourselves on a need-to-know basis only about our students without violating FERPA, and that just makes sense. If you need it to perform your job, then you get access to it. However, if I get access to it, that doesn't mean I can tell somebody else about it. You are precluded from discussing it further with anyone who has no need to know, okay? And this is important so that when you have people in the athletic department saying, hey, I need to find out some information about whether the student athlete's been coming to your class and some information. They've already signed a consent over in the athletic department. You don't even need a written consent. They have a need to know you are authorized to talk to them. If you've got any questions about that, you can call our office and we can walk you through that. Parents are the big one, okay? Here's what's different. When they were in K through 12, their FERPA rights belonged to the parent because they weren't of majority age. Once they enroll, and it doesn't matter if they're a 12-year-old brilliant kid who's here at the university, once they come to the university, the right transfers to the student. Parents have no rights. But guess what? They don't know that. And that makes it uncomfortable. So when you have conversations with parents and they want to get information from you, then you just politely say, I'm not sure that we have an authorization, and they'll insist that they do, but you say, I need some time to find out whether or not the student has authorized, because unlike in K through 12, where you were the holder of the right, now the student has the right. So let me get back with you and we'll find out whether or not your student is given permission. And then you can help the student go on to MyBama and get that permission. Am I out? Got 1 minute, let me wrap up. So you can disclose when the parents get consent. This one is not gonna be applicable to you all. This one won't be applicable, hopefully, unless you're in student life, then pay attention to this one. You can talk about whether we found disciplinary action based on alcohol. But the main thing is if there's a health and safety emergency, I'm always gonna say I'd rather defend a complaint that you violated FERPA than some child committing suicide. If there is a health and safety, they're gonna let us talk to anybody we need to talk to, and that's what's in the next couple slides. Who we're going to get to release it to, actually, let me get here. Anyone that can help, and if you notice, the last one is parents. So current or prior peers of the students, mental health professionals, law enforcement, and down at the bottom, our threat assessment team and parents. If they need to know to help us eliminate that emergency, then we're going to be done. If you mistakenly send out a spreadsheet, and it's happened, And it had student names and CWIDs. Immediately, please, immediately notify Ken Foshee, who's our registrar. And from that point on, you just do Ken, and then he'll take it from there. We have some new laws that apply, and the next slide talked about it, our Alabama breach notification laws. We need to do a quick assessment. Have we violated that law? And if so, we have to do notification to our students. So I don't expect you to become the expert. This has some details on it. But it's very important because we can be, if you look down at the end, we can be charged a $5,000 per day penalty if we didn't notify someone we were supposed to under this new Alabama law. So help us with that. And if you inadvertently send something out and disclose protected student information, please let us know. You will not normally, unless you did it blatantly, be fired. We're going to do some training, but we've got to know about this so we're not facing that. Religious accommodations, I'm going to ask you to look at the slides, but basically you've got a syllabus statement. It says, tell me about your need for religious accommodation at the beginning of this semester, and then you as the professor, you need to provide the religious accommodations, and if you've got questions about that, you can contact our office, okay? Sorry we're out of time, but hopefully I've given you lots of details in the slides and handouts.
So we have time for, I think, a couple of quick questions for the team. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask?
Yeah, from
okay, we've got.
I have a microphone for you.
We're bringing a microphone to you.
April, what's your question?
Hey, Elizabeth. I wanted to ask a question about mandatory reporting.
Yes.
And so if you are teaching a class where, for example, Introduction to Women's Studies and Gender Studies, and you know that there will be class discussions where people may say things, is it okay at the beginning of the semester to let your students know, I'm a person who is under mandatory reporting, so just to let you know, if you tell me something about such and such and such or something that happened at UA, I'm required to report. Can you tell your students that?
You can, and you could also, if you want to make sure that people are, not holding back in classroom discussions, you can put a caveat there with, if it's a classroom discussion, I may still report it to make sure you get resources, or you can tell them classroom discussions will not be reported because that falls under the classroom discussion rule, so we're not technically legally considered to have notice. But like I said, my main goal is to make sure students know their rights and resources. So if you want, you could also email us and we could give you something that you could just pass out to the students beforehand and say, if you report, if you talk about something, I'm not going to report it, but here's information if you want to report it yourself within the classroom discussion. Anyway, does that make sense? Yeah.
Gonna take me a second to get to you, sorry.
I just had a question about retaliation. Let's say that you have a student that maybe isn't doing the best in your class, you have a rubric, they haven't met those requirements, and then they report and say, well, this person just doesn't like me because they're an atheist and I'm a Christian. And so then it comes to the end of the class, and I noticed that one of the things on the slide says that part of retaliation is refusing to write a recommendation. Well, what if that student was just a poor student? They didn't do very well in the course. Can I deny writing that recommendation?
What I would do is tell them that you would be happy to do that recommendation. However, it's unlikely to be favorable, and you would like to get their consent. You want their written consent for you to give that information. Now, we still are going to be, if you're concerned that they've made a complaint about you, and now you're doing this letter of reference, I do want you to either, if it was one of the sexual misconduct kinds of things or Title IX, I want you to contact Beth or someone in Beth's office, and we're going to help you work through how you're going to communicate that back to the student. So that's what we're here for, to help you communicate back. I can't prevent someone from saying that's retaliation, but I can tell you there's lots of legal defenses available. We want you to be honest, but there might be some positive things that you can say about the student without misleading the person that you're writing the reference for. Do you have, yeah.
Okay, but I can't deny writing a reference for a student.
If you do it for everybody else, but you don't do it for the one who made a complaint, what are they gonna say? They're treating me differently because I made a complaint. And so that's, you know, I would be careful. Now, if I were the student and I knew I was gonna get a bad reference, I would not want you to continue, but does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You just want to treat similarly situated people the same way, okay? To avoid that claim of retaliation.
Perfect. One more question.
I also had a question about mandatory reporting. I know that a lot of students will not go to someone who is a mandatory reporter just out of privacy concerns, and I was wondering if there is a list of people who are not mandatory reporters and if we are allowed to give that out on campus.
Yeah, there's, in one of the slides, it's actually ua.edu/SAMS, so it's sexual assault and misconduct services, or support services, but it's SAMS. It has a list of all of our confidential resources. So if, you know, the student wants to go talk to someone at the Women and Gender Resource Center, or the Counseling Center, Student Health Center, Psychiatric Clinic, places like that have a legal confidentiality, then they can go there. It might be reported to UAPD when we talked about Cleary, but their name wouldn't be reported. So it might be for our statistics, but if you go to the Women's Center and tell them about something, they're not going to contact me. You know, so it stays within their office. So it's those confidential resources. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I don't know how you feel about this, but I always have a lot of questions. I learn something every time I hear these presentations, and I've been doing this a long time. So just know that this sort of thing is kind of organic. Stay on top of things. Know that there are resources. Beth's PowerPoint will be made available to you very, very soon. We just didn't have time to get it into the binders, but we will have it up on our website. I'd like to invite you to take a break. We'll convene back here around 10:30. And if you have further questions, Beth and Norma will be here a few more minutes. So we'll see you back here shortly. Thank you.